نتحدث على واقع كارثي يجري الآن في مدينة غزة. مدينة غزة الآن تباد بشكل واضح أمام مرأى ومسمع العالم. يجب كل العالم أن يتحرك أمام ما يجري في غزة. مدينة غزة الآن يا أمتنا يا عالمنا يا منظماتنا الآن تستهدف بشكل كبير جدا. يجب على العالم أن يوقف هذه المجازر التي تحدث بحق الناس، بحق الأطفال، بحق المدنيين. الاحتلال يقصف المباني المرتفعة لكن بداخلها مواطنين. بداخل المنازل المرتفعة هناك سكان. بداخل المنازل المرتفعة يوجد أبرياء. يجب أن يحميهم العالم، يجب أن تحميهم المنظمات، يجب أن يحميهم الإنسانية، وإلا سنفقد مزيد من الدماء في الساعات القادمة. إن لم تتوقف الإبادة وتتوقف سياسة القتل سنفقد مزيد من أرواح الأطفال والنساء والأبرياء. هذه أمانة حملناها إليكم يا منظمات حقوق الإنسان، يا عالم حملناكم أمانة عظيمة. يجب أن توقفوا شلال الدم في غزة، يجب أن توقفوا شلال القتل، شلال سفك الدماء، شلال قتل الصغار، شلال قتل النساء، يجب أن يتوقف قبل فوات الأوان.
So these were the latest images coming from Gaza after the genocide forces started to carry out more attacks against civilian buildings. Reports that 11 Palestinians were killed due to Israeli Zionist strikes on Gaza since the dawn. Now we're seeing more attacks of the Israeli terror forces against innocent civilians and buildings inside of Gaza, even though this campaign that they're talking about, the Gaza occupation campaign, did not begin yet. So what is Israel exactly doing? What are they planning to do? Reports in Israel are contradicting each other. You'll hear some people saying that they're not going to actually begin the ground operation attacks up until October. Other reports say that, well, they're going to be done by October. There have been meetings conducted between Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet, including plans that were promoted and pushed for the approval of the Israeli army. According to the reports that are coming, the Israeli army approved 2 plans, but not the third. According to these reports in multiple Israeli media outlets, the IDF approved campaigns that weren't as severe as the third option, whereas the government's trying to push for a bigger operation. Why is that happening exactly? Well, the IDF didn't want this operation anyway. They're saying that they need 250,000 to go and occupy Gaza City, 250,000 people being drafted. And again, more contradicting statements are coming now that they only need 100,000. But where is Israel going to get 100,000 from? In the peak of the ground invasion, when this genocide began, Israel had just shy of 90,000 with 5 divisions inside of the Gaza Strip. Now their military is doing far worse than what they were doing before in terms of manpower and people who are able to fight on the ground. But despite that, Benjamin Netanyahu is implementing what he wants to implement, which is terror against the innocent civilians of Gaza, in a way to apply pressure on the Palestinian side. Now, according to what's coming from Israel as well, more information, that they still haven't even concluded the shape of the operation and the type of operation and the time that they're going to begin this operation. However, the innocent people are still being targeted and they're still facing this genocide going on from the Israeli terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, a couple of things happen in the past 24 hours, up to 48 hours actually, especially with some interesting statements coming from none other than the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he's devoted to the expansionist Greater Israel plan. For the first time in history, Benjamin Netanyahu is outright confirming that a greater Israel is something that he is devoted to and something that he is actually promoting. Now, is this coming as a surprise, or is this something that Israel has been speaking about all along? Well, many Israeli leaders have been speaking about this for a very long time. Benjamin Netanyahu himself said after October 2023 and after the genocide began, that he wants to change the shape of the Middle East. And more statements are coming now from his depraved right-wing extremist allies like Bezalel Smotrich, approving 3,000 homes east of Jerusalem to bury the idea of the Palestinian state. Why is he saying that now? Well, that's a response to all of the Western leaders in Western countries talking about, we want to recognize a Palestinian state. He's saying that we're going to bury this idea of a Palestinian state. And he also had statements before of the Greater Israel. He was in France with the map of Greater Israel in front of him. He spoke about Damascus being part of the expanded Jerusalem, and they're clearly on a mission here, spiritual mission. According to Benjamin Netanyahu, he's viewing himself as the Messiah of Zion, the Zionist Messiah, right? Going ahead and trying to implement this image or this idea of a greater Israel, although this Israel isn't really able to beat the Palestinian resistance. What are they going to do with the rest of the world? Okay, what did the Arabs respond? I mean, Greater Israel includes Egypt, includes Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, parts of Iraq. What happened exactly? Well, they were fuming. They were fuming. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, Arab League, and the Palestinian Authority issue statements condemning the Prime Minister's comments, slamming mentality steeped in colonial delusions. Wow. I mean, that's what's going to put Netanyahu off his plan, isn't it? Them condemning and worrying and saying that he is delusional. Did that prevent anything? You've been condemning for the past 2 years. Condemning and under the table allowing Israel to continue the genocide. Condemning and passing Israel money. Condemning and passing Israel fuel. And that's from other Arab and Muslim countries too. Condemning and allowing Israel to go with its warships into the Suez Canal. Condemning and not taking any action to stop the genocide. Not one action. None of the Arab states, the entire majority of them, have taken any action to stop the genocide. Oh, even listen, if we want to talk about like financial pressure or severe diplomatic pressure, like some countries didn't even threaten to cut ties with participants in this genocide or take away their ambassadors or nothing. Even at the diplomatic level, let's say they don't want to do anything on the ground. Diplomatically, they haven't even exhausted 10% of what they can do from a diplomatic perspective. Cut ties with everyone sponsoring or supporting the genocide. What are you going to do? Stop supplying oil. Simple. Or at least waive with the threat to do that, let alone take action on the ground, which is what is needed. Clearly, Israel proved to the whole world that military action is needed to take down the Zionist regime in Palestine. This regime has to be dismantled. It has no future. So all of this talk about a two-state, firstly, you're seeing their responses. Netanyahu just had a statement not long ago saying that we are not going to allow a Palestinian state run by the Palestinian Authority or Hamas because both of them want to destroy us. The Palestinian Authority wants to destroy us diplomatically, and Hamas, Hamas and what they're doing. Is that a matter to deal with or a peace treaty with, or what is this exactly? It's a joke. It's not really applying any pressure on Israel. However, there have been certain developments in relation to the aid and also peacekeeping forces inside of Gaza, with recent reports that Indonesia is going to be sending military forces as peacekeeping forces and to provide military aid. It was approved by the Indonesian authorities to send more Hercules aircraft and military equipment to provide aid for the people inside of the Gaza Strip. Also, help treat approximately 2,000 Palestinians and then bring them back to the Gaza Strip. Now, some people were talking about the fact that Indonesia might be part of this plan to expel the population outside, which they outright denied. They said, we're going to treat 2,000 people and we're going to bring them back. And there are people who are being treated outside of the Gaza Strip, and they also have an option to go back to the Gaza Strip. Nothing in terms of this large-scale ethnic cleansing that Israel is talking about. They're outright denying it. But the interesting point here is the fact that they're talking about Indonesia participating in peacekeeping forces inside of the Gaza Strip, similar to what they've done in Lebanon. This is an interesting development. Why? Because clearly any talks about this day after that they're preparing for and some potential security arrangements are at a really advanced stage now. Indonesia is considered to be a country. Indonesia and Malaysia and other Asian countries are considered to be countries close to the Palestinian side, with multiple Palestinian groups. They're close to the Palestinian Authority. They're close with the elements with the Palestinian resistance too. Clearly, there's some sort of development happening there, especially with Israel now declaring that the head of the Mossad is going to Qatar. Mossad chief reportedly meets Qatari leader in Doha for hostage deal talks. So we have a situation now where Israel is outright participating in the talks. So we're no longer in a phase where Israel is not talking. If they're sending a delegation, that means they're doing a U-turn. They previously withdrew the delegation from Doha because according to them, Hamas wasn't really giving they're not playing ball with them. They're not being reasonable. They're not being serious. Both the Israeli side and the American side said that, and that they want to find these alternative options to try and reach a solution. Clearly, they did a U-turn on that. This is coming following more pressure happening from the civilian population. And Israel is facing pressure internally too. For example, there was a Jewish Orthodox man spraying there's a Holocaust in Gaza on the Western Wall that they consider to be very holy. And more people are protesting against the GHF inside of Israel, taking more action against the GHF. One of them was called the Radical Bloc in Israel, confronting GHF leaders in Tel Aviv, CEO John Acri, spokesperson Chapin Fay, and their team. GHF is not a humanitarian organization. It's a weapon of genocide. We will find them, disrupt them everywhere until the siege is lifted and GHF is dismantled. There was a bigger problem for the head of the GHF. This was sprayed outside of his house, John Acri. Death to the GHF. John Acri, the interim executive director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was targeted at his home and vehicle by activists protesting the organization's role inside of Gaza. Clearly, it's actions like these from the people that are leading to actions on the ground, whether when it comes to the policies being changed or the recognition that they're talking about or the humanitarian aid, all of that. These are very important developments. In the meantime, the Palestinian resistance is increasing its attacks against the genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip, with Al-Qassam brigades targeting 2 Israeli tanks with Yasin 105 and explosive devices near the Abu Hamid roundabout in the center of Khan Yunis. The Palestinian resistance has been increasing its attacks in the past few days. The attack before this had a sniping action against Israeli terrorists, and also other resistance groups inside of Gaza were targeting bases of the genocide forces. Today, a joint operation between Al-Aqsa brigades, Al-Quds brigades, and the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades, who are the armed wings of the PIJ and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, respectively, carried out a joint operation against the Israeli forces in Gaza. In other parts, in parts where Israel has been in already multiple times, like this is in Khan Yunis, Israel got in and out of Khan Yunis 5 times with their biggest divisions. Division 36 was there, up until they started to withdraw some of their forces from those areas. What does that tell us about the upcoming campaign? It's a recipe for failure. Firstly, Israel failed in every other place. Now they're selling this Gaza as the hub. They previously did this before, Al-Shifa Hospital was the hub, and then Khan Yunis was the hub, and then Rafah was the hub, and then they moved from one place to other. That's the hub. This is where the command. This is the final place where they're going to eliminate them, and they fail, and they get a beating, and their child-killing forces get eliminated and roasted and toasted and sent back in coffins or left in Gaza to burn in their APCs and tanks, and Israel doesn't achieve anything apart from murdering infants. That's what they do. And now this is a reflection of what's going to happen to them inside of the Gaza Strip, by the way, in Gaza City with this new campaign. Even reports in Israel are talking about how the Palestinian resistance is prepared for them and how intense this battle is going to be. Israelis are confirming that the Palestinian resistance inside of the Gaza City area are way more prepared than other areas. This is something that I've been talking about before the Israeli plan. The fact that this area, the fact that Israel did not carry out a ground invasion, which meant that the Palestinian side had a lot more resources and arms and weapons ready for Israel, even if they would allow them to get in, lure them into ambushes and pre-planned traps inside of the Gaza City. Because some elements in the Israeli government now are talking about the fact that they want to see Gaza City like Beit Hanun, total rubble, total destruction. I mean, Israel is implementing in Gaza what you used to see in comments of the Israeli public whenever we used to hear news about Gaza. Politicians and the public, level Gaza, level Gaza, level Gaza. We used to always hear that. And, people would think previously, what are these insane people? And now they're implementing all of that, but they want to continue this process to a level where they're destroying rubble upon rubble. Shows you lack of strategy, by the way, in terms of taking down the resistance, just damage and destruction. This is what these people understand, psychopathic. But they're calling to destroy and level Gaza City because it still has some buildings there. Clearly, you saw one of those buildings being destroyed by the genocide forces with families inside it, clearly. But we have an example of what happens in a totally destroyed area, like Beit Hanun, which is the closest town or city next to the Israeli borders. Some of the most intense attacks and ambushes that were carried out by the Palestinian resistance in the past 3 months took place in Beit Hanun. As a matter of fact, Israel declared that they killed the commander of Al-Qassam brigades in that area, only for him to pop up after the ceasefire, and even sometimes during the actual genocide taking place, roaming around between people and speaking to the public and making sure that he is in communication with everyone, over the ground, under the ground too. Another exposure of the Israeli lies. But that tells you that the destruction of buildings on top of the ground does not harm the capability of the resistance. As a matter of fact, it works to its favor, because Israel restricts itself further with its psychopathic, racist blindness and bloodlust, and this act out of anger and blindness, totally delusional. It helps the Palestinian resistance because imagine you are in an army or whatever, and you're having to work with destruction. I mean, if you need to find anything, you wouldn't be able to find destruction, let alone fighters who are moving from one place to another, having guerrilla warfare, moving from one place to another. Anyone with an ounce of brain or with an ounce of logic in the Israeli establishment, security establishment, is telling the political leadership it's not going to happen. Russia failed with guerrilla warfare. America failed with guerrilla warfare. Who are we to succeed with guerrilla warfare? This is going to be a Vietnam for us in Gaza. It's not going to work. But Benjamin Netanyahu and his maniacs are clearly preparing for something, despite the fact that the IDF is incapable. Ignoring the fact that the IDF is incapable. Being in denial of the fact that the Israeli army doesn't have the capacity and simply cannot. And that stems out of something more serious, by the way. The arrogance which leads to ignorance, with them being in denial of their own capability. They always had this impunity from the Western world. Oh, we can't criticize them, and these are God's chosen people somehow. And some people still selling this BS, by the way, for either religious purposes or whatever stupid delusional purposes. And now they are in a stage where their army has been humiliated. They don't have the same level of impunity as before. There are people who are saying things, okay, not stopping them, but saying things, because the fact that the Israelis, by the way, are even able to say or mention that we need to kill every Palestinian and every Palestinian baby is due to the fact that they are not being faced with any real challenge. So no one is threatening to kill them for saying that. No one is saying we're going to level Tel Aviv and other parts of occupied Palestine if you dare to level Gaza. That's why they're still talking, by the way. But reality, the same reality that they're refusing to accept now, will hit them eventually. The more they deny it, the more painful this reality check will be, which is clearly showing now within certain circles inside of Israel, whether it's in the public or the political, security, or military leadership. And the Palestinian resistance is reminding them day after day what their capabilities are. In the meantime, one of the only, if not the only, brave and noble Arab country officially from its leadership and population is still giving a headache to Israel. None other than Yemen. This time they targeted Haifa, Eilat, Beersheba, and Negev or Naqab area with drones, and it vows more attacks. There was a statement coming from the military spokesperson of Ansarullah in Yemen, Yahya Sari', saying that they conducted 4 operations against the genocide terrorist state in those areas respectively, and that this attack took place several days back. However, they also mentioned the fact that this escalation coming from Israel will be met with more actions coming from Ansarullah in Yemen. They already went into a more advanced phase in their attacks against Israel, and now they are continuing these attacks with no answer available from Israel. The United States and this genocide coalition, Britain / the United States in the Red Sea, was a huge failure. They were humiliated by Ansarullah, who were targeting US aircraft carriers and expelled them from the region, taking down Israeli-linked ships, humiliating everyone. And the United States, despite the fact that they tried to conduct even more aggressive attacks against them, after Donald Trump was having these escalatory statements against them and realized that this doesn't work, they reached a deal. We later found out that the United States administration was talking to them beforehand since the beginning. They were talking with them in relation to having a ceasefire, but the arrogant United States authorities were trying to make it as a condition to them stopping to attack Israel. But that didn't work. Yemen told them, no way. We're going to continue attacking Israel so long as there's a genocide and there's a siege. But eventually, the Americans gave up. Donald Trump gave up. He said, we can't take this anymore, suffering too much losses. 4 aircraft carriers bombarded, taken back, removed from the Red Sea. And of course, Britain, whatever America says, they'll follow. And it's not like, Britain has anything relevant with Yemen. And now Israel is faced with Yemen directly, but they also don't have an answer. The only thing they had to do, or they could have done, and they did, these theatrical attacks against, oil rigs or oil fields and the airport, some of the ports too, and Yemen repaired them very quickly and swiftly. And we saw airplanes going back and forth 1 or 2 days after these attacks. How likely is this to carry out or have an effect on the situation in Gaza and have Israel agree to something, or a ceasefire or de-escalation or whatever? Well, the reality is it's already playing a huge role. whenever Israel has any sort of calculation in relation to Gaza, it always includes the Yemeni threat. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why the American side took itself out, because they saw when there was a ceasefire in January, Yemen stopped the attacks. They carried out the attacks up until the last minute. And in the last minute when they were attacking, they were saying this is in support of the Palestinian negotiator. Look how honorable these people are. But then they resumed the attacks immediately after Israel started to attack Gaza again and broke the ceasefire. Again, with impunity, total. No one is criticizing them for breaking the ceasefire or anything of the sort. And although they had multiple attempts to hinder the ceasefire in the middle. Total impunity from the United States and from many Western countries too. And pathetic lack of action from Arab countries. Yemen resumed the attacks. What did the United States do at the time? What did Trump do? He made a deal with them. That deal wasn't to the approval. No, it wasn't with the approval of Israel, by as a matter of fact. Israel lobbied heavily to try and convince the United States to stay in the Red Sea. They had intense conversations with the administration to keep the coalition ongoing. But that didn't work. Like certain attempts in other parts in the region didn't work. But Israel realized at the time that we're being left alone with Yemen. Then they started to conduct these airstrikes, and sometimes they would carry out certain strikes from their warships in the Red Sea. And although Yemen, they had certain periods where, for example, you'd have certain days where they're not attacking Israel, the impact has already taken place. The Eilat port declared bankruptcy and it stopped its operations completely. The company running it shut down. This had devastating economic impact on Israel. And also to this day, they are carrying out specific targeted attacks that are successful inside of Israel. So they know that they have this pressure outside of Gaza. Now imagine that pressure was added by other countries too. What would be the situation of Israel? Would they have continued with the same intensity? What if it was still open as a front with Lebanon, for example, or if Iran didn't stop attacking them? What would have happened in that case? Would they have been able to continue? Or would they have been forced into an agreement to stop the attacks altogether? But clearly, the overall strategy of some countries who are on the other side isn't proven to be very effective against Israel, let alone the Arab states that are under direct threat from Israel, who are doing nothing but condemning. But so far, these Yemeni attacks have been proving that they are very, very effective with anything to do with Israel. And the Palestinian resistance confirms that too. And anyone tied with Israel confirms that too, because it is no longer linked with just the Israeli ships, or it's the ships that are trading with them too. Ships that are trading with them too, other countries that are trading with them too. It's causing them a huge problem. Now imagine this was added by, for example, Egypt banning only military equipment to go to Israel from the Suez Canal, or playing ball with Yemen. Things would have been different. However, the reality is it's only Yemen, which is an open front now. Add that to all of the escalating pressure and everything that's happening, and the fact that Israel is sending delegations now. This proves that the pressure is working. However, the people inside of the Gaza Strip are still suffering. There are reports that the aid is getting more intense, by the way. Like Egypt, there were reports from Egypt that 100 trucks went through the Karm Abu Salim crossing, which originate from Egypt. Again, more talks about Indonesia participating in other countries too, still not to the desired level. So there's a lot of lack of clarity happening at the moment, especially with the contradicting statements coming from Israel in relation to this military operation. In the meantime, the fact that talks are happening, that the delegations are engaging in talks, proves that the path to potentially have a de-escalation is also still open.